There is a strange, quiet tension in the air when the calendar flips to a date that the rest of the world tells you should be sacred. For most, a birthday is a crescendo, a day of forced jubilance, bright wrapping paper, and the rhythmic chant of a song we've heard since we were small. But for you, it feels like a glitch in the timeline. It's a day you'd rather sleep through, a day where the happy birthday texts feel less like gifts and more like demands for a performance you aren't ready to give. You treat it like any other Tuesday, because in your heart, the spotlight feels like an interrogation lamp. If you've ever felt a hollow ache or a sudden urge to disappear when your own birth is mentioned, you aren't cold and you aren't ungrateful. You are protecting yourself from a ghost you haven't quite named yet. We are told that our birth was the first great miracle of our lives, but for many, the anniversary of that miracle is actually an annual encounter with the invisible wall. This wall isn't built of spite, it's built of a very specific kind of psychological exhaustion. When you treat your birthday like a normal day, you are often practicing a form of emotional hibernation. You are lowering the stakes so that you don't have to face the crushing weight of unmet expectations. It is easier to say it's just another day than it is to admit that you are terrified of the silence that might follow if you actually let yourself hope for something more. This avoidance often traces back to a phenomenon psychologists call birthday depression, but that term is too clinical for how it actually feels. It feels more like emotional erosion. Think of a cliffside being worn down by the tide over decades. This erosion usually starts in the nursery or at the childhood dinner table. For some, the birthday was the one day of the year they were supposed to be seen, but the people who were meant to see them were too distracted, too volatile, or too absent. If you grew up in a home where your needs were secondary to a parent's addiction, a sibling's crisis, or a general atmosphere of neglect, the birthday became a high-risk gamble. To get excited was to invite disappointment. To expect a celebration was to hand someone the power to forget you. Eventually, your brain learned a survival trick. If I don't care, it can't hurt. You minimized your own existence as a preemptive strike against the pain of being minimized by others. There is also the heavy shadow of the social mirror. We live in a culture that treats joy as a competitive sport. Social media has turned birthdays into a curated exhibit of who loves me most. When you see others showered in public displays of affection, it reflects back a version of your life that feels fundamentally lacking. You start to perform a mental audit of your relationships, and the math never seems to add up. This leads to a state of ambiguous loss, a psychological term for grieving something that isn't actually gone, or perhaps grieving something you never had. You aren't mourning a person, you are mourning the version of yourself that felt worthy of being celebrated without guilt. For others, the normal day defense is a reaction to hyper-responsibility. If you spent your life being the strong one, the caregiver, or the emotional anchor for your family, the idea of being the center of attention feels inherently unsafe. Being the focus of a room means you aren't in control of the room. It means you are vulnerable. For the person who has survived by being useful, being celebrated just for existing feels like an alien language. You feel like an imposter at your own party because you haven't earned the space you're taking up. You find yourself cleaning up the wrapping paper or pouring the drinks at your own gathering, desperately trying to turn a moment of receiving back into a moment of serving, because service is the only way you know how to belong. This isn't just about being humble or low-key. It's a profound disconnection from the self. When you treat your birthday as a non-event, you're essentially telling the world and yourself that your arrival on this planet didn't change the atmospheric pressure of the room. You are trying to stay small, to stay safe. But there's a cost to this invisibility. Every year that you push the day away, you reinforce the narrative that your presence is a burden, or at best, a neutral fact. You are living in the gray room, a psychological space where you've muted the colors of your life to avoid the glare of the sun. But the sun is still there, and the reason it hurts to look at it isn't because the sun is bad, it's because your eyes have been in the dark for so long. The reason the gray room feels so comfortable is that it's predictable. In the silence of a normal day, there are no missed phone calls to mourn and no half-hearted gifts to decipher. It is a fortress built of low expectations. But beneath that fortress lies a deeper, more structural mechanism, the internalized calendar. From a psychological perspective, we don't just experience time linearly, we experience it emotionally. Your birthday acts as a recurring audit of your life's progress, a biological clock that ticks louder than any other day of the year. For the overachiever, the perfectionist, or the soul struggling with chronic comparison, this day is a giant neon sign pointing at everything they haven't yet achieved. It isn't just a celebration of birth, it's a deadline. This is where the survival pivot begins to take shape. You started treating the day as ordinary, not because you were boring, but because you are a protector. You are protecting the inner child who once waited by a window for a car that never pulled into the driveway. You are protecting the teenager who felt like an intruder in their own home. By stripping the day of its ritual, you stripped it of its power to wound you. You took the knife out of the hand of fate. There is a profound, quiet wisdom in that survival strategy. It kept you sane when the world felt inconsistent. It allowed you to navigate a landscape where your worth was conditional. You learned to be your own island because the mainland was too unstable. But as we move from survival to healing, we have to look at the mirror of worthiness. To treat your birthday as a normal day is to tell a lie to your nervous system. It is a rejection of the primary fact, the fact that you are here, breathing, occupying space, and influencing the lives of those around you, whether you realize it or not. The healing doesn't start with a surprise party or a cake with 50 candles. It starts with the micro-acknowledgment. It begins by admitting that the normalcy of the day is a mask. It's okay to acknowledge that the day feels heavy. It's okay to admit that the happy birthday song feels like a funeral dirge for the person you thought you'd be by now. Healing isn't about forced happiness. It's about radical presence. It's about standing in the center of that gray room and realizing that you are the one who painted the walls. If you can paint them gray to stay safe, you can eventually paint them with the colors of your own choosing. You don't have to throw a party to honor your existence. You can honor it in the quietest ways imaginable, by buying yourself the book you've wanted, by taking a walk in a place that makes you feel small in a good way, or simply by sitting with the discomfort of being alive and saying, I am here, and that is enough. The goal of redefining your birthday isn't to become a person who loves the spotlight. It's to become a person who isn't afraid of the light. It's about moving from existing to inhabiting. You spent years shrinking so that you wouldn't be a target for disappointment, but you aren't a target anymore. You are the archer. You get to decide what this day means. If it remains a quiet day, let it be quiet because you find peace in the stillness, not because you're hiding in the shadows. Let it be normal because you've realized that every single day of your life is a miracle of survival, not because you're trying to trick the universe into forgetting you exist. The next time the date approaches, don't look at it as a day of reckoning. Look at it as a ceasefire. A day where you stop fighting for significance and simply accept that you are already significant simply because you stayed. You are the gift that was given to the world on that day, even if the world, or you, hasn't quite figured out how to unwrap it yet. Take your time. The string is loose, the paper is thin, and when you're ready, you'll find that what's inside was never broken. It was just waiting to be seen.